The Loretto staircase is one that defies all logic and physics for the time it was constructed. In fact, many at the time believe it was the actual staircase that would lead to heaven. But what dark secrets does it actually hold? I mean, who thought a staircase could be this interesting with what I'm about to share with all of you in today's video? But first, let me ask you, how would you define a miracle? Throughout history, people have attributed the strange and unexplained to the proverbial powers above. We began sacrifices for the elements of nature to give us a bountiful harvest. The stories became more sophisticated and nuanced with the evolution of mythology. Volcanic eruptions to plagues were the signs of vengeful deities revealing their fury. And as scientific discovery began to bloom and religions that we recognize today began to take hold, the definition of miracle began to shift. What was a miracle if natural disasters and sickness could now be fully explained? Could strange occurrences, unexplained disappearances, and the otherworldly be the miracles of our era? Our first story starts at a church. Loretto Chapel is a small church located in Santa Fe, New Mexico in the United States. At first glance, there would be nothing novel about the small, unassuming chapel. Like any Catholic chapel, the interior of the building sparkles with gold and silver and glass instruments for these services. The high, vaulted Gothic ceilings are designed to make the viewer feel small amid the religious iconography that is painted on every wall, glowing with various colors from the stained glass by every imposing Romanesque column. Nothing you wouldn't see in any other Catholic church except for a grand, elaborate staircase. In the back of the chapel, you might see a long, wooden, winding staircase that spirals upward, connecting the first floor to a loft. Now, this staircase, made from dark wood and crawling upward in an almost Burton-esque fashion, does stand out among the otherwise symmetrical and gleaming white chapel. People from all over the world make pilgrimage just to see this very staircase. This includes, but isn't limited to, engineers, physicists, and mathematicians, many of whom don't even identify as religious. So why would they attend this pilgrimage and see this famous staircase? And what makes it so famous? To answer that, we have to go way back to 1850 in what was formerly a part of northern Mexico. Currently, the state of New Mexico in the US, being recently liberated and gaining their independence from Spain, the new sovereign nation of Mexico was working on improving and stabilizing their nation after years of hardship and war. One aspect of building up the nation was needing scholars and educators for the next generation of citizens. Due to Spain's influence, Mexico was a predominantly Catholic country. Much of the education at the time was through the Catholic Church via Catholic schools that were across the entire nation. One French bishop, Jean-Baptiste Lamy, was the bishop of a territory in northern Mexico that needed a school for girls. Bishop Lamy sent a message to the Catholic Teachings group requesting that someone could send nuns to educate the young native girls of the area. Well, 6 nuns were then sent to the Loretto Academy to educate the girls that were sent on a dangerous journey, as all trips to the Americas were, to point where the Mother Superior, the head nun, died on the expedition. The school was finally able to get started in 1853. 20 years later, a chapel was then selected to be on the campus to be open to the public. Now, Archbishop Lamy happened to be a big fan of Parisian architecture, so he requested that the new chapel be modeled after the marvelous cathedrals back in France. Upon fulfilling his request, a French architect was sent who had previously worked on the famous St. Francis Cathedral Basilica, the chapel of Our Lady of the Light. The chapel was coming along beautifully with the skilled hands of the architect, but sadly, after years of work, the architect perished before stairs could be built to the loft he had designed. Logistics became an issue too. The chapel was now too small and low to accommodate a typical triangular staircase. The situation seemed hopeless. They couldn't just have a loft with no way to get to it. The chapel was small enough as it was for a growing congregation. how would the church be able to fit an increasing number of people searching for spiritual refuge? Being the true Catholics that they were, the nuns got together and prayed a 9-day novena to the patron saint of carpentry, Saint Joseph. For those of you viewers who did not grow up Catholic, some explanation might be needed. Novenas are prayers using a rosary that you do for a certain amount of time in dedication to God or even a saint, essentially asking the saint to pray with you and that you would ask a living family member to pray for you if you were struggling. 9 days is a pretty common timeline for a lot of novenas. Saint Joseph is the father of Jesus who worked as a carpenter. After death, he was given the title Patron Saint of Carpentry. This is because he specialized in something in life, so he is honored for it in death. So, the nuns went to work, praying using the rosary every day in their 9-day novena, asking Saint Joseph to help guide them in the right direction as to what to do. Now, on the final day of the novena, a strange man appeared holding only a hammer and a carpenter's square. Graciously, he offered to build a staircase. Initially, the nuns were wary because they explained that a highly skilled architect had built this beautiful chapel, and they didn't have much equipment to give him. Additionally, the strange man seemed more common and less elite than their previous architect by his humble clothing. Nevertheless, the man was very friendly and assured the nuns that he only needed what he had. He did, however, request that he worked in private. He didn't want anyone to see him working. Thinking this was an odd request, the nuns were hesitant as they were worried this may have been a scam to steal the gold and silver goblets and crosses within the church. But the man reassured them he was just there to help and had no ill will. The nuns knew they were in a tight spot, so they agreed to his conditions, hoping for the best. They had asked him if he wanted extra help with labor. He would smile and politely decline, saying that it wouldn't be needed. Again, this was very strange for the nuns, who knew that their last architect, who was a professional, needed all the help he could get with such a taxing project. How long would it take this man to build the stairs if he was doing it alone? This was no easy task after all. Luckily, the nuns didn't have to wait long at all. Only a few months afterward, the man was done. The staircase was beautiful. It was structured as a double helix, swirling upward like an oak tree, spreading its arms. With no central pillar to hold up the staircase, the nuns wanted to ask the man how he built this marvel. The man was nowhere to be found. Searching everywhere, nuns nor anyone else on the grounds had seen the man that day. He had simply vanished without a trace. What was stranger is that the man didn't even stop to collect his payment. He brought nothing with him other than his 2 tools. How far would he be able to go without any money and no supplies? After interviewing everybody on the grounds to find any clues as to the man's whereabouts, the women realized they didn't even know the man's name, family, or anything about his identity. It was like he just appeared out of thin air. After a while of searching, the nuns and everyone in the town shrugged off the bizarre encounter and chalked it up to a strange encounter with a wayward stranger. However, as time went by, people began commenting on how strange this staircase actually was. Spiral staircases are designed with a singular pillar in which the rest of the staircase wraps around for stability. Makes sense, right? But this staircase had no pillar, or support beams, or anything that would keep this structure in place. In fact, the staircase was designed with a double helix structure, similar to DNA with 2 handrail beams coiling upward with nothing else holding them up. This design got the town talking. People from out of town began to visit this church to see the marvel and what else they could pick up from its strange design. In fact, some people with carpentry experience started to comment that the stairs didn't even have a single nail in them. How was this possible? No glue either. What was keeping this structure together? Immediately, the nuns rejoiced as they believed this was a miracle of God himself, that God sent Saint Joseph to the chapel to fix their church and bring it to the community. Word broke out fast, and the congregation of the church began to grow and grow by the day. After the years went by and more people began to hear of this architectural marvel, people began to examine the staircase more thoroughly and closely. Although there was no pillar holding up the staircase, the stairs still had stringers holding it up. That would ordinarily explain how the structure worked, but stringers are straight. These stringers were also shaped like a helix and pulled so tightly it was able to hold the weight of the entire structure. Now, this was simply unheard of at the time. Closer examination revealed that these stairs were also, get this, made of a wood that was not local to the North American Southwest region at all. Engineers marveled that the massive 1,000 plus pound staircase rested all of its weight on the singular bottom stair without the whole structure crumbling. After the invention of cars, the nuns were worried that the vibrations from vehicles nearby would negatively affect the structure. To combat this, they had a metal holding rod put in place to maintain the structure of the stairs. But oddly though, instead of improving the structure, the modern additions made it more unstable. Prior to the addition of the rod, the stairs were strong and seemed to be able to withstand anything. Bizarrely, people who walked on the stairs even noticed there was a springiness to the stairs when you walked on them. Additionally, the stairs could hold massive amounts of weight despite being structurally unsound from an engineering perspective. The nuns even had a whole choir do a performance on the staircase, loading dozens of adults on one seemingly feeble stand. The stairs were fine. By all accounts, though, they should not have been. It was only by modern intervention, or a lack of faith as some might call it, that the structure deteriorated slightly in quality. The structure was built without any electricity, only 2 tools, and no manpower, built in remarkable time, done alone without additional labor, and accomplished without witnesses. Even with today's technology, building a similar staircase in 5 times the amount of time would still be impressive by engineer standards. And what about the gravity-defying aspects of the staircase? For over a century, engineers, mathematicians, and scholars alike all have come to the Loretto Chapel to try and see if they can solve the mystery of the incredible structure. So far, none have cracked the code. So, what has happened to this chapel today? Well, over the years, the church actually got sold. Still open to the public today, the chapel has been turned into a museum, historical site, tourism center, and a very popular wedding venue. The chapel stands out among the other structures in Santa Fe, so luckily it was never demolished. Now, due to the tourism that the chapel and subsequently the staircase receive, it's going to be unlikely that the chapel goes away anytime soon. Some say it was Joseph the carpenter who built this physics-defying marvel. Others say it was a man sent by God himself to help this church. Some people even say it was aliens. I suppose you have to see the stairway to heaven yourself and be the judge. And there's a lot to be said about being a witness to a miracle with your own eyes, isn't there? After all, as the old saying goes, seeing is believing. Why go on the word of others when you could see for yourself what is truth and what is fiction? This is exactly how the town of Fatima, Portugal reacted when they were told by 3 children that they were given visions by God that would predict the future and that God would prove himself by making the sun itself dance in the sky. This event began in 1916 in Portugal, when 3 children, Lucia and her cousins Jacinta and Francisco, were asked to help the family by shepherding the sheep that day on the family farm. The family were devout Catholics and well-liked within the community. The children never caused any grief and were known for being very well-behaved. So, the parents saw no reason for the children to always be unaccompanied in their work, despite that all of the children were ages 10 and under. Now one day, as the kids were playing in the meadow while moving the sheep, Lucia saw a bright light glowing like a crystal hovering above the ground. As the children inspected this mysterious apparition further, the sparkling light began to shape and morph into a beautiful, human-like creature with wings. This being claimed to be the angel of peace and asked the children if they wanted to pray with him. The children thought it was an odd request after seeing a ball of light manifest into a person, but being children, they happily accommodated the request. The angel later told the children he was preparing them to witness the Virgin Mary when she would come to visit. The kids didn't understand and asked why they were going to see Mary, and the angel responded that Mary had very important information that she specifically wanted to share with them. The angel expressed that humanity needed to know what was going to come in the near future, and people, pure and unselfish of heart, such as innocent children, should be the ones to share this knowledge with the world. The angel then disappeared in front of their eyes after promising he would come back. The children began to become excited and they would get to meet Mother Mary, and it would be an honor to bring them and their families. The children raced home and told their parents, aunts, and uncles everything. The adults in the family were dismissive and, like most adults in that situation, just assumed the children had an imaginary friend or that they were playing a game of pretend. The children were told no matter what they saw, they still had chores to do and no imaginary friend was going to change that. The kids were disappointed, and no one believed them at first, but they were more preoccupied by the excitement of seeing the pretty, sparkling man again who was so nice to them. For weeks, the children waited, and no sign of the man had come. It was coming to a point where even the children were starting to believe that maybe they had imagined the whole thing. It wasn't until weeks later that the same angel appeared again to the children. So the children raced down the meadow and enthusiastically greeted this supernatural stranger, beyond happy that their odd encounter was not imaginary. The angel settled the children down and told them that the world was at a lot of unease and pain, and it would only get worse if humanity did not change and repent and become kinder. At this time in 1916, the world was currently engulfed in World War I, the Great War, where advancements in technology meant that man was coming up with more ways to kill and cause destruction. The angel referenced this to the children and said they needed to pray and prepare, because if man didn't change, something much worse was coming. The children asked why the angel was so invested in spreading this warning, and the angel responded that he was the guardian angel of Portugal, and it was his duty to try and stop any more pain as best he could. That's why he was relying on the children to spread the news. He claimed he couldn't appear and speak to just anyone. After leaving them, the children once again sprinted back home, told their family everything that had happened. This time, the parents were beginning to get concerned. It's one thing for a child to mention offhandedly that they saw a pretty light that talked to them. It's a whole other when you have 3 kids giving a very specific and articulate message about the dangers of international warfare. Clearly, somebody was telling these small children to repeat this. The parents got together and discussed if maybe there was another shepherd on the property who was talking to the kids, but after the uncle went with the kids several times after this incident and saw no one, the family concluded that maybe, just maybe, it was an odd event. Maybe the children had heard it from somewhere. So months go by, and by the time autumn finally rolls around, the angel appeared a third and final time. This time, the angel had a golden chalice in his hands. The chalice was filled with blood, and the angel had the host, a wafer used in Christian services to represent the body of Christ, in his other hand. He knelt in front of the chalice and taught the children a prayer of reparation, a prayer of forgiveness to the children before he offered them to the host. He told the children that the Virgin Mary was coming, and with big news, and the children needed to spread the word that man had to repent and humble themselves and stop causing all the pain in this world before something worse comes. Once again, the children mentioned the angelic apparition to the family members without much coming from it. Although, because the children had been speaking about these visions for so long now, the parents had mentioned it to the other villagers to see what they could possibly make of it. Word began quietly spreading around the town about this odd happening, but not much coming from it. All of that would change by 1917. It was then that the children finally saw the apparition of the Virgin Mary. The children were asked to herd the sheep near the Cave of Peace, also known as the Cova de Aria. They saw a massive flash of lightning crack across the sky, and the children covered their eyes as something bright was swelling over the cavern. Like the angel, the light sparkled like a sun rising over an ocean, and the children opened their eyes to see what they would describe as the most beautiful woman they had ever seen. Dressed in white and golden robes, the woman told the children to not be afraid of her and that she was a friend from heaven. For 6 months, she came to the children every 13th of the month at the same time. Mary asked the children if they would be willing to suffer in order to do the right thing and bring hope and peace to the world. Lucia was the first to speak up that day, and they were ready. Lucia then claimed that light shot out of the palms of her own hands, and all 3 children were rendered unconscious for only a few moments. When they woke up, Mary was gone. As gossip was now ripping through the town about the amazing claims these kids had, people in the village asked if they could attend to some of the meetings with Mary to see for themselves if she was really there. The children agreed, and the next meeting, over 50 villagers attended the rendezvous. Now, this is the point in the story where you would expect Mary to not turn up at all, with the children making a million excuses as to why she didn't appear. But what makes this story a noteworthy tale in history is that Mary allegedly did show up, and 50 adults in the village claimed to not only see her, but hear her actually speak to Lucia. When Mary appeared before the villagers, she asked Lucia to pray the rosary every day to pray for the souls of the lost. She also told Lucia that it was important for her to learn how to read, as illiteracy, especially among young girls, was very common at this time. Mary had told her that her cousins Francisco and Jacinta were going to go to heaven very soon, but Lucia would live much longer and needed to devote herself to spreading the word of peace. Lucia asked Mary if this meant she would live her life completely alone without her cousins by her side. Reportedly, Mary smiled at Lucia and told her that no one is ever really alone. Once again, light shot out of Lucia's hands, but this time, an image of a heart wrapped with thorns was inside the light. Lucia understood this as a metaphor for the love in the world being poisoned with hate. The next month, the town was reeling over the 50 witness accounts from adults in the village who claimed to have witnessed the entire thing. And now word was spreading like wildfire, and the children went off on their own the next meeting, as Mary had promised them visions that only the children could see. As Mary appeared again, the children claimed that Mary cracked open the earth's crust using light that radiated out of her hands beneath the earth's surface. The children said they saw the bowels of hell itself and the demons within. The children were understandably horrified by their first vision that hell was supposed to be real. Mary warned the children that she showed them this vision to help them understand that if humanity didn't devote themselves to living more righteous lives, more people will be sacrificed and a war much worse than the Great War was just on the horizon. Strangely, Mary had requested the children to make specific prayers on Saturday to try to bring Russia back to God, saying horrible things were going to happen to Russia in just a few years if their leaders don't devote themselves to piety and compassion. The third vision was that an angel wielding a flaming sword above as a man in white robes below climbed a mountain-top blessing with the souls of the dead. When he reaches the top, a human soldier had killed him with bows and guns and watched him perish. Lucia was told to keep these visions a secret for a short time. As the children went back home, they weren't quite themselves for a few days, as they were still reeling from the shock of what they had experienced and seen. The mayor of Fatima requested that the children be brought to him, as he didn't like the attention the children and subsequently the town were getting. The children were kidnapped by the mayor's employees, and even when threatened with death, the children never changed a single detail about their stories. When the children were released, they saw Mary a few more times, and she told the children October 13th will be the day of the miracle. Now, tens of thousands of people came to see the cove to see the apparition of Mary and this alleged miracle. Everyone from skeptics to religious figures and fanatics made pilgrimage to this place, with pious believers even coming barefoot and praying the rosary as they walked. In 1917, in front of tens of thousands of people in Fatima, Portugal, all witnesses claimed they saw the Virgin Mary appear to them. Mary told Lucia that the Great War was going to end very soon, but she was still concerned about how man was behaving. If they did not stop their wickedness, a worse war was on the way. Lucia asked if Mary could cure sickness and trouble from the people in the crowd, as many had requested. Mary said that although she was happy to intervene with some mortal problems, many people's troubles could be fixed by the individual's labor themselves. She encouraged everyone to not only pray for themselves, but pray for people who are dying that have no one to pray for them. Before she left, Mary asked Lucia to make sure a church was built where she was, as this was a special place and people needed to pray more. Mary then held up her hands towards the sun, and a flash erupted as she disappeared. The sun began to zigzag and dart across the sky, and people were screaming in horror as the sun then looked like it was going to fall on the earth, making people think it was the end of days. But the sun didn't land on the crowd, but instead it zoomed upward and went back into place, leaving behind a stunned and horrified crowd. After a few moments, people in the crowd began to notice that disabilities and sickness had vanished. The lame could walk, the blind could see. People in the crowd began rejoicing and weeping at this otherworldly supernatural occurrence. Hundreds fell to their knees and praised thanks between sobs of joy. After the miracle, it was discovered only the people of Fatima could see the sun dance, but the sun moving was seen by over 20 miles away from the site as well. Shortly afterward, Francisco and Jacinta fell ill from the Spanish influenza epidemic that had now swept over the entire world. And just as Mary had warned, both children would perish young and leave Lucia behind. And sure enough, Francisco and Jacinta died from a fever shortly afterward. A priest suggested that it would be better for Lucia if she left Fatima, where she was treated as both a celebrity and met with fear from other townsfolk. She was, after all, still a child. Her parents agreed, and Lucia learned to read and study with Carmelite nuns, getting her education that Mary had requested. She ended up becoming a nun herself. Lucia claimed to still see visions of Mary and speak with her through the years. In 2005, Lucia died at the ripe old age of 97. All three children are recognized as saints in the Catholic Church and hold the title of the youngest non-martyred saints in the entire church. What makes this story extraordinary is just how many witnesses there were to this claim. In a lot of similar tales, the deity or miracle doesn't occur in front of witnesses for one reason or another, but on multiple occasions. Thousands of people witnessed exactly what they were promised. Even today, there are photographs proving that such a pilgrimage did in fact take place on that fateful day in 1917. How did the children know when World War I would end? How did they know about Stalin's atrocities and World War II would be the war to end all wars? How did hundreds of people get cured of various diseases and injuries simultaneously after witnessing the same event? How do you, the viewer, define a miracle? I want to know what you guys think. Be sure to let me know what you think in the comments down below. I'd love to hear from all of you. Also, if you're a fan of storytelling of the mysterious and supernatural, be sure to go ahead and subscribe for more content just like this. As always, I love you all, keep an open mind, and I'll see you guys in the very next video.